Wolverhampton Wanderers, hopefully this time they can do the business.
Hello, Wolves fans. Welcome to the latest episode of the E&S Wolves podcast, brought to you by the Express and Star and in association with University of Wolverhampton at the Halls. My name is Jonny Drury. I'm here with a bit of a sleepy Liam Keen after a late deadline day. That 7 p.m. deadline that was introduced in the last couple of years is a bit pointless, really, from a Wolves point of view this year, as some deals went to the line. How are you, Keeno? I know you were waiting, and they finally got done, didn't they, late last night?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not one to criticise the very hard-working team at Wolves because I'm good mates with them. But yeah, I mean, come on, guys, 7 p.m. deadline. I mean, we're announcing them at 9:30 and 10 p.m. No, I mean, messing. It is what it is. I mean, the windows tend to drag on a little bit, and I'm sat there just actually. Have you ever watched the trailers?
No, I haven't watched it. Although I have got loads of people telling me to watch it.
Mate, you've got to watch it. You've got to watch it. It's so good.
But the more people tell me to watch it, the more I'm like, I'm just might rail against them.
Yeah, that's the kind of person you are. I think you need to you need to drop that stubbornness a little bit and just go and watch it. Honestly, it's genuinely really good. So while I was like, okay, I'm waiting around for these transfers to get announced, I've got my stories ready. I'm ready to go. I'm just waiting for them to get announced. So me and the missus went and started watching the Irish version of it. It's on BBC iPlayer to watch it because they've only just done their first series, where obviously the UK version's in their fourth season. So yeah, we watched a couple episodes of that last night while I had to keep pausing it and getting up. I was like, oh, sorry, okay, we're announcing Adam Armstrong. Let me pause the show, get back up and announce this. So it wasn't like I was glued to the laptop by that point because we knew what was happening. So just getting them over the line. It could be a lot worse. I remember Wolves signing Carlos Forbes, which was the summer. When would that have been? Summer 25? No, summer 24. Summer 24 that would have been. And that was still at the 11 p.m. deadline, and I stayed up and waited up the whole time, and it got announced at 1 a.m. I think it was. Even though obviously he'd already been signed because they got the deal through in time, and then he was absolutely rubbish. So in a Wolves shirt, he's gone on and done all right since then as well, but he was rubbish in a Wolves shirt. So yeah, it was. Look, we got through it. We got there in the end, and it was a slightly strange transfer deadline day, wasn't it? There wasn't a lot of deals done. Like Wolves were relatively busy, but a lot of it was sort of waiting around. But otherwise, not a lot of clubs did a lot really in the Premier League. It was a bit of an odd one.
I think there was 7 or 8 deals altogether.
I think it might have been 7. I think I heard that this morning. Yeah, and obviously Wolves were involved in 3 of those, weren't they? With Larson going as well. So yeah, slightly bizarre end to the window, but yeah, at least we were semi-busy. So I'll take that. It's better than doing nothing.
Exactly. We're going to review the transfer window, bit of analysis on that. Where Wolves stand now. How prepared they are for the inevitable life in the Championship next season. We'll react to the Bournemouth game. Obviously, we talked a little bit about it on Saturday, but well, a bit of a dive into that. We've got plenty of questions from you, Wolves fans. And yes, we've got plenty else to talk about as well. We'll also preview the Chelsea game and get Keeno's big prediction. But the transfer window is what's been on people's lips in the last few days, Keeno. Everyone kind of knew what was going to happen yesterday in terms of Adam Armstrong coming in and Angel Gomes as well. Let's just start by saying Wolves are essentially a team of Gomeses now with all the Gomes. I had a bit of a Google to see how many other players with the second name Gomes are around. There's a winger who plays for Exeter. I thought Wolves might make a move for to make it 5, and there's a couple floating around Europe. So they're not too far off a full team of Gomeses, really, are they?
A full team. I mean, that would be. I mean, it'd be easy to do my predicted 11, wouldn't it? When I'm looking at the full team of Gomez's. I did see a stat somewhere. I mean, I'm hoping I'm not getting this wrong, but I think it was the last team to have 4 players with the same surname. I think it might have been Crew, like 1960 or something ridiculous like that. I might have got that year and club totally wrong there, but I only saw it very briefly on social media earlier. But yeah, I mean, and to be fair, I mean, all 4 of the Gomez's potentially could be sort of interesting, different kind of players and characters for us to assess between now and the end of the season. But yeah, I mean, look, as long as Angel Gomes adds a little bit of something to the team, then he's a welcome Gomes.
Imagine writing a match report that though, if there was more or Gomes is it? Imagine that you having to put like our Gomes.
Well, it's easy with
Gomes.
Totti because he sort of goes by Totti most of the time. So
well, yeah,
when I write his name, I write Totti Gomes, but then the second time I refer to him, I don't call him Gomes, I just call him Totti. It was like with Adama Traore. It was Adama Traore, then it became Adama. That's sort of the same sort of way. But yeah, you're right. With João Gomes and Rodrigo Gomes, I have to do J Gomes, R Gomes. Well, I refer to them the second time in match reports, things like that. So I'm gonna have to do that for a third player now. But there's worse things to be worried about than how I'm going to phrase my match reports. So yeah, let's not worry too much about it.
No, let's not worry too much about that, like you say. So as we said, as it worked out, Armstrong in, Angel Gomes in, no Che Adams deal, despite links to him. Jorgen Strand Larsen is gone, 43 million, potentially rising to 48. We talked about that yesterday and how good of a deal that is for Wolves. A possible departure for Emmanuel Agbadou in the coming days, and then obviously nothing happened with John Arias, who was linked with a move back to Brazil. Keno, let's have a kind of an overview of it. I think coming into the window, everyone knew where Wolves stood. I think if they had a few more points, they might have spent a bit more money. They might not have let players go in terms of Strand Larsen, but they are where they are. Life in the Championship is getting ever closer. How do you view the window as a whole? And the business that Wolves have kind of done or not done, and how how do you see where they are now? How do you think Rob Edwards will be kind of feeling this morning after the transfer window slammed shut?
I think he'll be relatively happy, and we'll call into a little bit of a debate about sort of whether it's sort of been weakened or not in a second. But I think I've always been a little bit sympathetic to Wolves with this window in that. It was always going to be a difficult window to do some business. It was always going to be difficult because, if you got a few more points in, a few other games, i.e., the Bournemouth one we're going to talk about is a great example. But, when Rob first came in, Forest game at home, there was a few other games around it that were sort of seen as fixtures that you could have got some points in. If Wolves had slightly more points, there would be more of a reason, I suppose, to maybe go for it and spend the kind of money. It was pretty obvious by the time they got to the start of the window, and even they had a little bit of a better run. But even during the window, it was pretty obvious that it would be a futile attempt, really, from Wolves' side to go and splash the cash, put yourself in a slightly more difficult position in the summer when what is the likelihood or reality of saving this season? It is minuscule, isn't it? It would be a miracle to be able to turn it around. So I did sympathise with them. It's difficult with sort of how to approach it in terms of bringing players in. At the same time, we've got certain players being linked with moves away, and obviously we said from the very beginning that having one of the sort of big three going out was likely, at least one of them, and one of them did, obviously, in Larsen towards the end. He was the one, the most obvious one to go as well. And how they were going to navigate that and bring the sort of, find the balance between the business side of things and maximising the money, and then also the football side of things and not weakening the side. So again, a little bit of sympathy. I think there'll be a little bit of frustration from a fan perspective of how long it takes to sort of get here, because Adam Armstrong was mentioned by us on this podcast about 2 weeks ago, maybe even 3 weeks ago, something like that. Certainly during the window, we mentioned him and said that we understand there's a little bit of interest. They've mentioned his name's been mentioned, and at that point, it hadn't really gone any further. A couple of people tried to suggest to me that it probably wouldn't go any further, but I was led to believe otherwise and sort of kept it under my hat for a little bit until I got the information. Of course, then was able to break it exclusively on Sunday that the Wolves had made an inquiry about him. So that will be the frustration, I think, that that Wolves maybe have taken a little bit of time to get here. Equally, based on the comments we've heard from Rob Edwards and my understanding of the situation is, I think they wanted to get a few out first. So let's very quickly run through it. Hoover gone out on loan. That was something that had to happen. They were overloaded on that side anyway, and he's not shown to be good enough for the Premier League, in my opinion. Menezzi gone out on loan. I think has got his values to an extent, but clearly wasn't really working under Rob Edwards, and certainly at that stage in the Premier League. So his going out to play makes sense. Obviously Trey was being a sort of younger lad, gone out again, makes sense. Fer Lopez, for me, I know a lot of fans might disagree, but I think he needed to go play. there were some arguments that maybe he could have gone to the Championship, and there were clubs that were interested in him, and the club, Wolves did consider sending him there as well. But for him, I suppose he's not got loads of experience and still relatively young. It was going back to a familiar environment where he's probably going to flourish, and he did go and score a fantastic goal, didn't he, on his first game back in the Europa League as well. So for me, that makes a little bit of sense. And then speaking to Rob Edwards in his press conference before the Bournemouth game, the messages were really that the numbers they've got in the squad right now, and this is obviously before Angel Gomes has come in, before Armstrong has come in, and before Larsson's left at this point. He said the numbers we've got now are roughly around what we want. So he doesn't want too many more numbers, doesn't want too many less. And that's sort of where Wolves have been left. And obviously we'll come on to a couple of potential outgoings as well. So I think before I talk about the individuals, which I'll let you quiz me on in a second, the overall feeling for me with this window is that it's okay. It's decent. It's decent enough. I don't think it's a disaster by any means. I think it's a very good end to the window, particularly the money you've got for Larsson. And to be honest, it was probably about as much as they could have done, really, knowing that it's going to be a very, very busy summer with outgoings and incomings.
You talk about the outgoings. Obviously, you've rattled them off there. The main one is obviously Jorgen Strand Larsen, which went through yesterday. It no doubt leaves Wolves a little bit weaker at the top end of the field. You're replacing Jorgen Strand Larsen with Adam Armstrong, somebody who hasn't got a fantastic record in the Premier League. But I suppose, it's a case that with Strand Larsen gone, Wolves can kind of muddle through to the end of the season and put together a respective points total, while also having a striker now who could bed in and be prepared for that, fight in the Championship next kind of season. You look at his record, well, Armstrong's record in the Championship, aside from a loan spell last season, it's phenomenal. So I think this is a situation that we haven't kind of seen before from many clubs, even if clubs are dead and buried at Christmas. But I think Wolves have been quite savvy in the case that they've added two players that, they're not top Premier League talents, but they can probably hold their own in the Premier League. Give Wolves not a fighting chance, but a fighting chance of putting together something respectable. Mm. But they're obviously then ready-made for the Championship next season.
Yeah, firstly on Larsson, he wasn't playing, first of all. So, he's a player that's on your bench. He scored one Premier League goal this season, and you've got up to £48 million for him once the add-ons are achieved. And my understanding is that most of those £5 million in add-ons are relatively straightforward to get to, provided that he has a decent sort of goal-scoring record in the Premier League with Palace. So Wolves are going to get the bulk of that 48 million, I would suspect. They've got 43 guaranteed, and I think it's a pretty decent deal. It's more than they would have got in the summer, in my opinion. So that's a good start. And he scored one Premier League goal, and he wasn't playing. So I think it has to be seen as a good deal. Very quickly, before I talk about those incomings as well, I think it's really important to mention as well that Wolves turned down 50 million and 55 million from Newcastle for Larsson in the summer. My understanding and my reporting at the time was that Newcastle would have gone higher than that as well, had Wolves sort of engaged in the negotiation. Jeff Shee was very firm that he was not going to engage, was not going to negotiate, and was not going to sell Jorgen Strand Larsen. And I said at the time that I can't really go back on my sort of thoughts and feelings on that and say that it was the wrong decision. And that he was one of Wolves' best players, and they refused to sell him. So I have to see that as a positive. And I still have to say that, because for me, he is still one of Wolves' better players, or was. And it was probably the right decision at the time. But the only reason it was the right decision at the time is because there was very limited time. We were talking a week to 10 days left of the window by the time these bids were coming in. Limited time left in that summer window. And Wolves, and this is my biggest criticism of them all the way through in these last few years, their lack of short-term and long-term planning, particularly long-term planning, has been incredibly poor. I mean, most good clubs, most well-run clubs know who their next manager and next player is in certain positions. Wolves don't have a clue about any of those things. That's what's got to change under Nathan Shee as interim, and whether he gets the job permanently, and Matt Jackson as technical director. And they need a little bit of time to go and prove us either right or wrong about whether they can go make those changes. I can't pass judgment on them yet because they've not been in those positions long enough. So they deserve the opportunity to go and make that change. But I can certainly criticise the previous regime under Jeff Shee by characterising it as haphazard and scattergun and not planning forward whatsoever. If Wolves were well run and planned ahead, they could have sold Jorgen Strand Larsen for probably north of £60 million in the summer to Newcastle and brought 2 or 3 players in for that money and had a stronger squad for it. But they didn't, and we're here. So let's not dwell too much on the past, because I thought that was a really important point to get across. Because you're right, Wolves have brought in Adam Armstrong. Let's talk about him initially, because he's essentially the Larsen replacement, striker for striker. He can play in a couple of other positions as well. He can play across the front line, kind of similar to Hwang, I think, in terms of his style and stature and all those sort of things. And you're right, he's got a fantastic championship record. So I'll just read a couple of the numbers out here. And let's start with the Premier League very quickly, because the distinction is important. In 88 Premier League games, he's got 6 goals and 7 assists. So he clearly hasn't been able to do it in his very brief spells in the Premier League. But his last full season in the Championship, I think, was 21 goals. He's got 11 this season as Southampton's top goal scorer. And in 277 Championship games, he's got 91 goals and 37 assists. I think that translates to sort of roughly a goal involvement every 2 games, whereas his goal involvement in the Premier League is every sort of 6.5 games. So roughly anyway. So that is a big distinction. That's a big difference. He's turning 29 sometime next week. I think it's the 10th maybe of February, turning 29. So he's experienced. A 3.5-year contract's maybe slightly inflated, but I understand it because his people would have wanted him to have those assurances as well. So I can't criticise it too much. And what it does is it sets you up with a player for next season, because and let's hope he can sort of find his rhythm a little bit and play under Rob Edwards and get comfortable with the players that will be here next season as well, and get himself settled. But he's homegrown, he's experienced, particularly in the Championship, and he's proven to be a goal scorer in the Championship. So for all those reasons, it has to be seen as a good signing, doesn't it? And I'm sorry I'm wittering on, but you did ask me about Angel Gomes as well, so I'll quickly address him. I think it's a really interesting signing. I really do. I think technically, I really like him. I think he'll bring a lot to Wolves technically. But we've seen someone who was really good technically in Tommy Doyle, who didn't quite adapt with the physicality. I mean, slightly different circumstances, because Angel Gomes has had a bit more experience elsewhere. But Angel Gomes is very diminutive, and he's going to have to make sure that he can deal with that physicality in the Premier League, and only time will tell. He's only got 5 Premier League appearances from a long time ago when he was with Man United. I mean, he's got more than double that. He's got 12 appearances in the Champions League. So he's going on playing with Lille and then Marseille. So yeah, I think I'm kind of sort of semi-excited by that deal. But with a caveat of he's not done it in the Premier League yet, and let's see how he gets on. But for anyone who missed it, it was $7 million permanent deal for Armstrong, with rising to 2 million with add-ons, so 2 million in add-ons, rising to 9 million, on a 3.5-year deal. And then with Angel Gomes, it's a loan to the end of the season, but an option for Wolves to buy for around about £6 million in the summer. I'm led to believe that would still depend on sort of a contract agreement with Angel Gomes in the summer to keep hold of him. So there's no guarantee you keep hold of him for next season, but it's one to keep an eye on.
Just finally on those deals, obviously we said that it sets Wolves up. Let's say the Gomes deal does go through, it's permanent in the summer. These are, like we said, shrewd moves ahead of relegation to the Championship. Do you think it gives Wolves fans a bit of confidence now that, when they do go down, that they can bounce straight back up, and that they've got confidence in the people that are making the decisions now, that they can assemble a squad? Because let's be honest, the majority of that squad is going to go because they're valuable assets, even though they're going to finish rock bottom of the Premier League, or, probably will finish rock bottom of the Premier League. There's still players in there that are going to move on because they'll be on big wages, and they probably still get decent fees for them. But given the kind of these 2 deals, and I know it's only a small kind of sample size, but on that, does it give more confidence now when you've got the likes of, obviously, Nathan Shee replacing Jeff Shee? You've got Matt Jackson in there who replaced Domenico Tetti. and obviously Matt Hobbs before him. Does it give that just that little bit of confidence that we're going to go down, but we should be all right?
Yeah, I think it's only fair of me to, as I've already said, that you've got to give those people a little bit of time to either surprise us or prove us right or prove us wrong, or however anyone's opinions is or sort of preconceptions are of those people. I think you've got to give them the time to go and do the job because they've been here a matter of a few months. So that's the first thing I think is really important to say, because it would be disingenuous really of me to sit here and criticise when there's not really been a lot of time to make substantial change. So let's see how that change develops. And by the way, if it doesn't develop, I'll be the first person to criticise. I'm not, I never have been, never will be afraid of being fair and objective, whether that is with praise or with criticism. So let's see how that develops. But what I will say is that I actually think it's a fairly decent start in terms of preparing for the Championship, because let's look at whether the squad's been weakened or not. I mean, I think there's an argument to suggest it may have been, particularly in that striker position. I know some fans won't agree with me, but I think Larsson was still Wolves' best striker. Wasn't starting, wasn't scoring the goals, but Tolu Arakadáre's also got one Premier League goal this season. So let's not pretend that he's gone and scored 10 this season, and there's a big difference. In my opinion, Larsson would still be your best striker. So you've lost him, and you brought a player in that hasn't really done it in the Premier League. So there's an argument there. I think the midfield situation is interesting because Angel Gomes has come in. I think keep an eye on someone like an Arias. The Brazilian window is open until I think early March, and there's still some interest there. So let's keep an eye on potentially whether there might be some movement with Arias. And that goes the same with Agbady, by the way. The Turkish window is open until Friday, and Besiktas are still interested in signing him. So let's see if that again develops. So there's still potentially some movements there on outgoings. But yeah, I think the sort of argument of whether the squad has been weakened or not, I think in terms of numbers, not really. I mean, I know technically you would have lost a couple of extras with someone like Person Trewa and Manetzi going out, but in my opinion, I don't think that weakens the squad really. I think they needed to go play, and you probably have too many numbers as it is. So I think in terms of numbers, you're probably okay. I think in terms of quality, there's potentially the argument with sort of Armstrong and Larsson, depending on the way you fall with that. However, obviously you've got a great deal for Larsson, and also you've been able to keep a lot of your other players. You've been able to keep João Gomes. You've been able to keep Andre. Again, ironically, players I didn't think had a good game at the weekend, but we'll come on to that in a little bit. But some of you sort of more important players there, you've been able to keep the sort of nucleus of it together. You've got an opportunity now to not have an embarrassing season. You can go and get some points and finish with a little bit of pride and momentum, and beat that Derby record first of all, and then have some momentum going into next season. And then you've also now got a couple of players, one in particular in Armstrong, but potentially with Gomes as well, who will drop into the Championship with you next season and give you an opportunity to bounce back. So look, Wolves have got a long way to go to be ready to bounce back straight away, because this is going to be a very, very intense summer of players coming and going, in my opinion. But I do think it's probably a step in the right direction. It's not 10 steps. It's not maybe one huge step, but it's something. It's something I think in the right direction, particularly with an Armstrong signing that I think could be a good one for next year. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of positivity to take out the back of the window. But let's not pretend that it's been, wholesale changes and a phenomenal window, because it hasn't, but also probably couldn't have been, could it?
Before we get on to questions, let's just have a bit more of a reaction to the weekend. Good chance to get closer to that I lost my words then. That history-making low points total from Derby. A win would have taken the Wolves level on points with that. Didn't quite transpire that way. It was a game of that old used football cliche, fine margins. Wolves with a few big chances in the game. Bournemouth with not an awful lot of chances, but the ones that they did have were almost gift wrapped to a certain extent. Keno, you've mentioned here in the notes that lost a midfield battle. Both goals were probably down to mistakes in midfield. The first one, the lad's got to take it well, and it's a hell of a strike. But Wolves have kind of handed the goals to them, and like we said on Saturday, it's the result, the performance, the way it happened was probably, it probably mirrors Wolves' situation at the moment and where they are on the table.
Yeah, I mean, it was frustrating really, because Bournemouth were a decent side, don't get me wrong, but there wasn't really a lot in the game. And I think how you analyse this depends on sort of glass half full or glass half empty approach. I mean, the glass half full approach is that the Wolves had a fantastic opening 20, 25 minutes, maybe 30 minutes or so of that game, creating chances, playing on the front foot, really competitive. And in terms of being competitive, they lost the game, but they didn't. It could have gone either way, and they didn't lose it convincingly. I think 2-0 was probably harsh on Wolves as a scoreline. I think they probably, based on the sort of chances in the game and the overall balance of the game, probably deserved a point as well. But that would have been a game they would have lost a lot more comfortably earlier in the season, put it this way. And I think that's testament to some of the work that's been able to do to make them more competitive and better. So that's the sort of glass half full approach. The half empty approach for me is Andre making a huge mistake. It's a really silly mistake as well, because Hwang is free. He's calling for the ball. He's probably got 15 yards on the next marker. I mean, he's open, and he delays and delays and delays, and then he plays it. And he plays it once a Bournemouth player has closed that space down and wins the ball. Look, Bournemouth had to do a fair bit to go and score that goal afterwards. It was really sort of neat, intricate 1-2 play and then a fantastic finish, but it's still a mistake. Then all of the chances in between that. I mean, Tolu Arakadare has to take a couple of those chances, particularly the one that Hugo Bueno put on a plate for him. 10 yards out, centre of the goal, running onto the ball. I mean, to be honest, for a Premier League striker, that's a tap in, as far as I'm concerned. And I think he's good enough to score that goal as well. I don't think he should be missing it. So that's a big chance that he's missed, and he had a couple others as well. And Wolves in general, I mean, Larson actually missed a big chance, didn't he, as well? His sort of last big involvement in a Wolves shirt, missed a big opportunity. After I think João Gomes had a shot save. So yeah, there were chances missed. That was frustrating. You're sort of then pushing to sort of get an equaliser, pushing to get a point, and you can see that second. And talking of the midfield battle, I thought that they were both poor, actually, in my opinion, throughout the whole game, particularly by the standards they've set. But João Gomes is with Ryan, the new signing for Bournemouth, tracks him and then just lets him run off him in the box, sort of almost half gives up on it and allows him to go past him, allows him to get the cross in. Alex Scott gets the run on, I think it's David Moller-Wolf at the far post, and it's a tap in. It's frustrating because Wolves probably should have got something from it on the balance of it, but equally, if you don't take your chances and you have those opportunities, you're not going to get points, you're not going to win games. And forgive me for, again, a bit of a rant, but this is a really important point that I wanted to mention. I wrote about this in my analysis piece afterwards. Alex Scott scoring that goal at the end, for me, just triggered almost a bit of a full circle moment for me. So Wolves tried to sign Alex Scott in the summer of 2023. He was one of their main targets. They had an £18 million bid rejected by Bristol City. They had a £20 million bid rejected by Bristol City. They were in talks to get him. The player had a tour of the training ground a few months prior. It looked like he was going to come to Wolves. Julian Lopetegui was really keen on him. Everyone was really keen on him. And Julian Lopetegui feels that, and this is why he walked away from the football club 4 days before the start of the season. That's when Gary Neal arrived. Julian Lopetegui feels that he was misled over over what he was promised regarding funds that were available. He feels that Jeff Shee misled him. He feels like he was lied to about how Wolves' spending power. Wolves went through an incredibly difficult profit and sustainability concerns during that summer, and were extremely limited on the players they could bring in based on the fact that they even though they sold Neves and Cody and Jimenez and Nathan Collins that summer, etc. And in July 2023, they basically sort of turned around and said, we don't really have the money to bring Alex Scott in, and that was essentially the situation. And then Lopetegui walked away not long after. For that to happen then, and then 2.5 years later, he scores the winner at Molineux, as Wolves are destined to be relegated from the Premier League. For me, is a great sort of full circle moment to highlight the mismanagement that Wolves were under Jeff Shee, because the fact that happened in that summer and Lopetegui was able, walked away when he did, and that whole situation, the way it played out was pretty embarrassing in the first place. But the consistent mistakes and errors and everything that led us to this point. So that was, I think, important for me to mention, because as soon as he scored, I'm just thinking to myself, he should probably be in a Wolves shirt, and Wolves should not be battling relegation. This is the 8th season in the Premier League, and Wolves should be doing a lot better than this. But they're going down. because of the consistent errors, the consistent mismanagement, and the consistent bad recruitment. Not because of a bad recruitment team by any means, but by bad decisions from the very top. And yeah, it's frustrating, really. I'm sorry to go a slight negative there at the end, but it just left me with a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth, really. And that's nothing against the player, obviously, or Bournemouth by any means, but a little bit of a bitter taste, because that shouldn't be Wolves going down. It should be a very different situation.
Yeah, and Alternative University is a Wolves player. Julian
Exactly.
Lopetegui is still in the dugout, and Wolves are probably mid-table in the Premier League. There's these sliding doors moments that have led to where we are now. Right, time for a shout out for our sponsor. As always, the E&S Wolves podcast is brought to you in association with the University of Wolverhampton at the Halls. And here is a latest rundown of some of the events they have got coming up in a few days' time. If you're an R&B or a garage fan, Rewind, the Journey of Soul, R&B and UK Garage Live is coming to Wolverhampton, and tickets are on sale with your last chance to buy ahead of Saturday. A few days later, XLOV, the first full European tour, is taking place on the 11th of February. Those tickets are on sale now. If something else is your bag, the Next Step Legacy World Tour 2026 is coming to Wolverhampton on the 20th of February. Those tickets are also available right now. And as we told you last week, the Kaiser Chiefs, more employment to 2026 plus support from Corella. They are headed to Wolverhampton later this month on the 28th of February. So if you are keen, get your hands on some tickets now by going to thehallswolverhampton.co.uk. Right, let's get to the questions, Keno. This one's probably already been answered by Robbie Batch has said, is the option to buy with Gomes dependent on safety or not?
Yeah, probably a good idea to sort of reiterate this, because I think there was a report a few weeks ago, a week or so ago, when it first came out the Wolves were interested in this player, that was suggesting that was going to be the case. So yeah, just to make it very clear, Wolves' option to buy him is not dependent on them staying up. So in theory, he can be a Wolves player in the Championship. I think it's logical and makes sense to surmise that it would be slightly more difficult for Wolves to keep hold of him in the Championship. They would have to. I'm led to believe they would still have to be in agreement with the player to make that a reality. But it is a £6 million, roughly £6 million option to purchase him. And look, if he knows Rob Edwards already. They've worked together before in the England's FA setup, youth setup. If he gets on well and settles in, if he performs and has a consistent place and feels wanted and feels happy and knows they'll play every week in the Championship and has assurances over what money Wolves are going to spend, etc., etc. Lots of different things that go into it. Also depends on the sort of interest from elsewhere. If there's no clubs, or there's some clubs but it's not good enough, or it depends on the money. There's loads of different things that go into it. There is a potential that he's a Wolves player in the Championship next season. But yeah, I think it's too early to tell whether that'll be the case or not. There's a lot of moving factors. So let's see how it plays out.
Let's see, indeed. Let's see how that works out in the summer. That's one to cross then. Ellen Young has said, how likely is it that Wolves move for Che Adams in the summer? Well, given the consideration that they've been linked with him for about the last 10 windows, Keno, you'd imagine they probably will go back in for him in the summer.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a surprise whatsoever. So Wolves obviously did open talks about bringing him back to England from Torino in Italy in this window. Didn't materialise. I think Torino didn't really want to let him go, so that didn't really materialise as Wolves would have liked. So that would have been an extra addition. That was sort of, again, you imagine with one eye on the Championship. And he's a player that when he was at Southampton, Wolves were in for him. When he was a free agent, Wolves were in for him. Obviously, now he's gone to Torino, Wolves are back in for him. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Wolves went back there in the in the summer for a Championship season. And I think Charlie Austin was asked about both Armstrong and Chadams, because he obviously would know both of them, having played with them. And if Wolves were to get both of them for a Championship season, and I think his sort of opinion description is that if you get both of them, that's probably 20 goals there in the Championship straight away, because both of them are going to get at least 10. You would expect probably more than that as well. Yeah. And I think that's probably a fair assessment from him as well. So yeah, I think Wolves could do worse, particularly going into a Championship season. At the same time, he's also been there and done it, is a little bit older. Do you go for someone who's a bit younger and fresher? There's obviously arguments for and against. So, yeah, I think Wolves could do worse, and it wouldn't surprise me if they're back at the table.
Harry has said, why exactly did Fer Lopez go out on loan? Seemed to be one of our most creative players when he came on, but barely got any minutes. Was he poor in training or unsettled here? Starting to look like another Guedes or Fabio Silva situation. Well, I'm sure the Fer Lopez argument's probably been intensified by the fact that he scored an absolute worldie for Celta Vigo on Thursday in the Europa League. But yeah, what do you make of that one, Keno? Is it going to be a mistake?
I understand why you've gone down the route of sort of bringing up Guedes and Fabio Silva, etc. I don't think that's fair. I mean, the fair on fair. I've not got anything at all to indicate that he's a bad trainer or unsettled or anything like that. I mean, he seemed like a very nice, very confident, but very nice individual, and I've had interactions with him. I've not had any, and normally you get a bit of an idea and a bit of a win from it. And look, maybe I'm wrong, I might hear some things further down the line, but as of right now, I've not heard anything from anyone to suggest that he's been difficult or anything like that. He obviously wants to play, so that's the first thing to mention. I think, as I say, Wolves were considering sending him to the Championship. There were clubs interested, and I think what ended up being the thing that moved the needle for him to go back to Celta Vigo is the fact that he arrived at Wolves having not played many games. I think he might have played, 17 senior games when he first arrived at Wolves? He'd hardly played anyway, still only 21. And it was like, right, well, you can go back there, you can play in an environment that you know, and it's probably going to get the best out of you. And that's, for right now, for what you need, is probably the best thing. So I don't really disagree with the idea of sending him there. I think the merits of sending him to the Championship to get prepared for next season would have been, that was merited as well. I think there was a lot of that would have made sense, but I can't really argue with, if he's going to go and play and he's going to get opportunities and score a goal like he did on Thursday, then I can't really argue with it too much. And also, I think if you look at it objectively, he hadn't done enough in a Wolves shirt. I mean, yeah, he had a couple of decent moments, got an assist against Leeds in that when Krejci scored in that 3-1 defeat at Molineux. Otherwise, a couple of okay sub appearances, did well off the bench against Shrewsbury. I know he's not had loads of chances either, but the chances he has had, I don't think he's ever ripped it up as well. I don't think he's ever really shone. And I just think he needs a bit of time. So let's hope that he's a player that I think will go on to have a good Wolves career, because it's obviously been a little bit of a stuttering start.
Stuart Elliott has introduced a keen or not keen.
Here we go.
So here you go, Keen. Keen or not keen, Adam Armstrong will score 3 Premier League goals for Wolves in his 3.5-year contract.
That's actually a really interesting question, because obviously phrasing it as Premier League goals means he's got the rest of this season, and then if Wolves come back up, and let's hope they do, he's got that as well. I'm going to phrase it as you're saying 3 or more.
3 or more. Yeah.
I'm going to take it as that's what you're saying. And I'm going to say Keen. I think he scores more than that, even Premier League goals. I'm hoping he'll score more than that between now and the end of this season, but let's see how that goes. But let's hope. I'm just hoping that Wolves will get it right and be able to come back at the first attempt.
Dom Rust has got in touch and said, Angel Gomes talks us about previously working with Rob Edwards and why he is keen to join. Is Rob's reputation and connection something that could be an asset come the summer rebuild? Now, I'm guessing that Gomez's links to Edwards would have been with his time during England. I know Rob worked in
England, I believe that's right, yeah.
And obviously has worked at other clubs. What do you make of that, Keno? Could that be, we've talked there about, the little bit of positivity about heading into the Championship and, the evidence being there, albeit so small that, the Wolves might get it right. Could Edwards be a big pull in a time where we hear all about, data and scouting and all this? I think the pull and the reputation of a manager sometimes gets a little bit lost in that.
Yeah, I think it's to be honest with you, a lot of really good questions this week. I think that's a really interesting question, because I do think it will work to an extent, because he's sort of known as being someone that sort of people quite like working with. And I think that will be attractive to certain players. I think clearly players that have worked with him previously will be attracted to that proposition. So I definitely think it's got some legs. Absolutely. What I'll say has got more of a merit is the size of Wolves as a football club. Wolves is a big football club. Dropping down to the Championship in a league they don't belong in. Wolves belong the other way. Wolves belong in the Premier League. Obviously, the big concern for some people would be that Wolves are going to drop in the other direction, drop down into League One, like one happened previously, obviously, with Wolves getting relegated, Solbakken coming in, and then Dean Saunders taking over and going down. But equally, other clubs, I mean, Cardiff are down there right now. Derby have been down there. West Brom might be dropping anytime soon. There's Birmingham went down. There's lots of clubs, good clubs. Sheffield Wednesday have been one. Lots of really good big clubs that have dropped down from the Championship down into League One. Obviously, I say Wolves have been there and done it already, not that long ago. So obviously that's a concern, but I think the pull of Wolves as a football club and what they are, particularly in the Championship, will be a big pull for a lot of players.
Well, they are going to be. They are arguably going to be probably the biggest fish in the division in terms of stature and size, aren't they? You look,
got to be up there.
There's big clubs up there, but let's say Coventry capitulate. They're obviously a massive club, but yeah, there's going to be. They're going to have, and as well, they're going down. They're going to be moving players out. Obviously, that's going to free up wages. Obviously, the parachute payment situation and all stuff like that. They're going to be one of the big hitters. So there are a number of, I wouldn't say positives to going down, but there's a number of factors that are going to put Wolves in good stead, and that the Edwards kind of reputation is another one of them, isn't it?
You've just got to get it right. It's got to get it right with recruitment. Say it to a blue in the face. You've just got to get it right.
Final question comes from Drew, who has said, how many windows until Wolves spend £20 million on a single player again?
Again, a really good question. And that sort of links to really the last question as well, because for me, and I'm glad I didn't say it in the last one, because I could have saved it for this question. What it comes down to for me is what the level of ambition is. So we've seen in the last few days that, Nathan Shee and Matt Jackson and other senior members of the Wolves leadership team, all meeting with, first of all, the trust about their manifesto for change that they set out, and then with all those fan groups. I believe they call themselves the Wolves Fan Alliance. It's that sort of group of 10 different fan support groups who had a representation. One person represented them all from each group in this meeting, and they went through a load of different things. And sort of put a statement out and everything. And within that, one of the things they mentioned is that if Wolves go down, they want to have a maximum of one season in the Championship and come straight back up again, is what they've said. But the proof will be in the pudding. The level of ambition and how much Fosun are willing to invest and how much Fosun are interested in bringing Wolves back into the Premier League will be told in the coming months. We get into the summer and players are going out, players are coming in, and how much. It's not just, by the way, it's not just the number of how much money Wolves spend, although that is going to be an important factor. But it's the balance of the squad, it's the quality of the individual players. If they're overpaying for a player that's not good enough, then it doesn't matter about how much you spent on him, because the player's not good enough anyway. But obviously, the level of investment is going to play a part as well. So, how far that ambition is to come straight back up, we will see it in real time. We will see if the proof is in the pudding very, very shortly. So that's the first thing I'll say. And then it's a really good question, because not many clubs are going to be spending £20 million on a player in the Championship, are they? And I don't know whether, it was almost a decade ago now that Wolves spent 15 million on Ruben Neves. But it wouldn't surprise me if you get a couple of transfers that are around that figure. I do wonder whether they might not quite reach that 20 million figure on a few players, because it might be difficult with trying to overhaul a whole squad. So let's maybe say 3 windows until that happens. But honestly, it's like having a pot shot with a blindfold on, because it's so difficult to tell, because as I've already phrased it in the past with how Wolves' planning is and how the recruitment's gone, managers at football clubs, managers of the football club don't even know what money they've had to spend on players. So me guessing whether they're going to spend £20 million on a player is so difficult to answer. Let's hope the planning and the preparation is way better than it's been previously, because if it's not, we might be faced with a difficult situation again.
Here's a question for you. Who's the last player above 20 million that Wolves signed? And I'm asking that, not knowing the answer. I'm just leaning on your Wolves knowledge.
Oh, it would have been, who was their last signing of the summer? Was Krejci the last one? Krejci was the last one, wasn't he? And he's officially on loan, but it is going to be over.
I don't know why you're looking at me. I'm expecting you to come up with the answer and be assured and know it, Keen.
Sometimes I can't remember the order of how the signings came in the summer. I mean, Krejci was on loan, but when you include the purchase this summer, that'd be 26 million total. So, I know Tolu Arakadare was right at the end of the window, and he was 20 something. He was in the early 20s.
He was just above 20, wasn't
he? Yeah, so he's probably him. There was a couple right at the end of the window, but you expected me to remember back in the summer? That's like a lifetime ago now.
Oracle of Wolves, mate. Should be knowing this straight off the bat like that. Thank you very much for your questions, Wolves fans. Almost out of time on today's poddy, but we're going to look ahead to Saturday's game against Chelsea. As Chelsea come to town, Keno don't get any easier, does it?
No.
Wolves going to need to channel one of them performances against the likes of United over Christmas to try and grind something out, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, Chelsea are a weird one as well because obviously they've gone 2-0 down at home to West Ham, haven't they, at the weekend? And I know they've got a new manager themselves in Liam Rosenior, and you're sort of trying to figure out exactly what they are and what they're going to be. And obviously, I know they came back and won that game against West Ham. But regardless of how maybe inconsistent they're going to be or exactly what Chelsea we're going to get, they're clearly still a very talented side, spending a hell of a lot of money on those kind of players. So, of course, it's going to be difficult for Wolves. I mean, for me, the midfielders have to be far better. Have to be. I'd be really interested to see how the two new signings fit into this and whether they come into. I mean, well, obviously we're recording this very early in the week, and they're going to have all of this week now to train. So there's, in theory,
that would be the next question. Is the big decision maybe not Armstrong, but Angel Gomes, and whether he comes into that? Whether we see a three-pronged Gomes midfield or, where is Matheus Mane moved elsewhere, that is a bit of a possible conundrum for.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see Mane moving out of that position at the moment. So my instinct is that they're both on the bench and you stick with the players you've got there at the moment. But in theory, they could both start as well. But yeah, that midfield has to be a key for me. I mean, obviously, Enzo Fernandez in there for Chelsea, a player that Wolves obviously tried to sign before he went to Benfica, is a very good player who I think is going to be a real key to Chelsea sort of getting through this period and also getting through this game. But for me, I mean, I sort of wanted to open it up a little bit with my look at this game and maybe look a little bit beyond it. Not because I think Wolves are, it's a free hit by any means. I think Wolves can definitely get a result if they, particularly at home. But looking at the games that are coming up, I mean, so at home to Chelsea, then midweek after that, away to Forest, which is a bit of a difficult game. I know Wolves could definitely get some in there, but it's not easy that. And Forest are doing okay, sort of recovering a little bit with a couple of results recently. Grimsby then in the FA Cup, and I mean, no one wants to lose that for obvious reasons because it'd be very embarrassing for Wolves, so they have to try and win that game. Then it's Palace away against Jorgen Strand-Larsen. And Matt Hobbs, of course, who's now the sporting director there, former sporting director at Wolves. A little bit of a reunion there for a few people. Then it's Villa at home on a Friday night. Then it's Liverpool at home midweek after that. So it's not the easiest run of games in the world, especially when you throw in a potential banana skin of an FA Cup tie in there as well. It's not the easiest run of games at all. And that's why the home games are going to be really important. And that's why I know it's Chelsea, but Wolves have to try and put together a performance that is good enough to get a result. And if you do that, you give yourself the best possible opportunity and you've just got to take the chances that are in front of you. And I'll be honest, I think Wolves will score. I think Wolves will score against Chelsea. I think they'll give them a little bit of a decent game. My prediction, unfortunately, I'm going to go for a defeat. So this is maybe not quite ending on the positive note we all hoped. But I'm going to go 2-1, slim defeat, and Wolves give a good account of themselves. And let's hope I'm wrong, because Wolves have a terrible performance, but win 1-0. I think everyone probably prefer that.
That's the, just finishing off, that is the kind of the mindset now, isn't it, of Wolves, probably supporters and probably players. They've gone to Man City, they haven't been disgraced, they've picked up them good results over the festive period. They put that run together at the start of the year. You've got Chelsea coming to town. And like we said a couple of weeks ago with City, if it was back 3 months ago, you'd be thinking, how many is it going to be this weekend? But it's not, and there is a feasibility and a possibility that they could nick something.
Of course, absolutely. I mean, they're way more competitive now in their performances than they were previously. So I'm not expecting Wolves to be turned over. I'm not expecting Wolves to be battered and embarrassed, which is a far cry from what they were previously this season. So that, of course, is a really good positive. But you've got to get the points just to back it up a little bit as well. And also, to be honest, I mean, at this point, fans just want to avoid the Derby 11-point record. If you 12 points above is all Wolves fans want at this point in time, and they're not too far away from it. So I think it's an opportunity, certainly. I've gone with a defeat. I hope I'm wrong, because it is a chance at home, despite the opposition, to maybe go and do something.
There is a chance there indeed. Keno, good to see you. As always, mate, feel like I've seen you more than me misses in the last 24 hours across this podcast and the deadline day. So I probably won't see you for a few days now.
Yeah, you're bored of me now. Okay, I get it.
But all the best for the weekend. Wolves fans, thank you, as always, for listening. And we will be back next week on the E&S Wolves podcast. So until then, for me and Keno, goodbye.
Wolverhampton Wanderers, hopefully this time they can do the business.